Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. It's great to have you along. It's good to see all the people showing up here early. Somebody wanted to start early. Eddie asked if I've taught a series on 1 Corinthians. If are you a partner? For the partners, there is an NCST course that you have access to as a partner that we do cover. Excuse me. Most of the New Testament, actually, including 1 Corinthians. For those of you who are not partners, you can become a partner or wait and we'll eventually get there. All right, so we are in chapter 11 of Revelation, and we are heading into a few chapters here which may be the most difficult of the entire book, at least for me. And we're going to go slowly because there's just so much imagery here. And one of the things that causes, at least for me, hardship are the pronouns. Pronouns always cause problems, right? There's just so many mixing of metaphors and allusions to things in the Old Covenant, or in the Old Testament scriptures, but they seem to be used differently. So today, I'm only going to try to persuade you of one thing, and then what I want to do is kind of lay out the questions, the things we have to work through, and give you some homework, some things to work on before we come back to this next week. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. Alfred says, 1 Corinthians 15, very challenging, but once you get it, everything falls into place. Are you getting it in a first century fulfillment, Alfred? Okay, so before starting at verse 1 of chapter 11, I want to show you where this is going, because I think this is very important as far as the timing. Speaking of timing, Revelation 11:17 says, "We give thanks to you, O Lord." This is the 24 elders who are on the thrones. They fall on their faces. "We give thanks to you, O Lord God the Almighty, who is, who was, and who is coming, because you have taken your great power and reigned. And the nations were angry, and your anger came, and the time of the dead to be judged, and to give the reward to your servants, to the prophets, and to the holy ones, and to those fearing your name, to the small and to the great, and to destroy those who are destroying the earth." Okay, so the nations are angry, God is angry, and it's the time for judgment. And notice he pulls out here, or focuses on the servants, the prophets, and the holy ones, and those fearing his name. And then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen in his temple, and there was lightnings, voices, thunders, earthquake, and hail. So what I think is going on here is God opens his temple in heaven, the heavenly temple, for these folks in verse 18 to enter the heavenly temple, which raises the question, where were they before they entered the heavenly temple? And the Ark of the Covenant, with the lightnings, voices, thunders, earthquake, and great hail, that would remind us of what we've seen again and again of the Sinai covenant and the severity that surrounded giving that covenant, and then that spilled over into the covenant curses and judgments. If you don't understand the significance of that just yet, that's okay. We'll get there. But I wanted to kind of show you where this is going. All right, so let's go back to verse 1. Again, I'm going to more try to raise your awareness to the questions, at least that are in my mind, without persuading you of anything yet, except for one thing. I want to persuade you of who the two witnesses are. I think that part is clear. Okay, so 11:1 says, "And there was given to me a reed like to a rod." Okay, so this is John. Remember, John is the one here who's told to take up and eat the scroll. And it's bitter in his belly. In his mouth, it's sweet as honey, but it's bitter in his belly. And he takes the scroll, and this one who is speaking to him, and there'll be more on that here in a moment, says, "You must again prophesy about many peoples, nations, tongues, and kings." So he's not only going to be prophesying about Israel, but also the nations. So then John is given a reed like a rod. And the one who's saying this, and you see these brackets here, this is kind of goofy in the Greek, but it's the messenger. It's the one who's speaking here. He says, "Rise," so John, "rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those worshiping in it." Where have we seen someone told to measure the temple before? You remember? Rob says, "Is this the same Ark of the Covenant in the Old Covenant context?" I believe so. We'll talk about it more next week when we get there, but I believe so. Where have we seen the instruction for someone to measure the temple before? Anyone? If you were with us in the... You guys are all saying Ezekiel. Ezekiel 40. Was that? I know the measurements are given there. Is there someone specifically told? Sorry, I'm just scanning here all around. So there are measurements of the temple. John says Isaiah. So I'm just scanning Ezekiel 40 here. Chambers. He measured the breadth of the doorway of the gateway. He measured the gate. All right, so there's measuring here. That's not what I was thinking of. Yeah, Sana, very good. Zechariah. This is very similar to what we saw in Zechariah chapter 2. And here's one of the questions I have. This seems to me in Revelation 11 there, it seems like an allusion here to Zechariah 2, and we'll see an allusion to Zechariah 4, but it's different. So this is Zechariah 2. "And I lift up my eyes." Actually, let me shift to the Septuagint. Sorry, Darren. I'm going to read the Nets version now. "And I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a man and a measuring line in his hand. And I said to him, 'Where are you going?'" So Zechariah says to this man, "Where are you going?" And he said, "To measure Jerusalem, to see how great is its width and how great is its length. And behold, the angel who talked with me stood still, and another angel came forward to meet him, and said to him, 'Run and speak to the young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be abundantly settled because of a multitude of people and animals in it. And I will be to it, says the Lord, a wall of fire round about it, and I will become glory in its midst. Oh, flee from the land of the north, says the Lord, for I will gather you from the four winds of the sky, says the Lord. Return safe to Zion, you who inhabit daughter Babylon. For this is what the Lord Almighty says, behind glory he has sent me," that's that mysterious me we looked at, "to the nations who despoils you, for he who touches you is as one who touches the pupil of his eye. For behold, I am bringing my hand against them. They shall be booty to their own slaves, and you will know the Lord Almighty has sent me. Rejoice, be glad, O daughter Zion, for behold, I am coming, and I will tent or dwell or tabernacle in your midst, says the Lord. Many nations shall flee to the Lord for refuge on that day, and shall become a people to him. They will tent in your midst. You shall recognize the Lord Almighty has sent me to you, and the Lord will inherit Judah, his portion in the Holy Land, and will again choose Jerusalem. So there, and we talked about this in the Zechariah series, the angel is sent to measure Jerusalem, and it's so big that Jerusalem can't be measured. I see Alfred's there. Jerusalem or the temple? Yeah, good question. So I'm kind of combining these two here, but that might be a worthwhile clarification to make. Yeah, that's good. In the measuring part is alluding at least to Zechariah, it seems. And there, the city is going to be so big, and the temple is going to be rebuilt, that they can't even put walls around it. Here, it's different. Yeah, Alfred, that's a really good qualification. He doesn't actually say measure the city, does he? He says measure the temple, which is a helpful qualification, because in Zechariah, the city is going to be so big as God brings people into it, you can't build a wall around it. Here, there's a specific purpose of the measuring of the temple. So there's an allusion to Zechariah, I would say, but it's not exactly the same. Okay, yeah, very good. So measure the temple. Everyone says there's a 30-second delay. What happens if you refresh your YouTube page? See if that catches up and gets closer. All right, so measure the temple and those who are worshiping in it, and leave out the court that is outside the temple. And if you know your Jewish history, you know that the temple outside is the Gentile court. And sure enough, he says, you may not measure that court outside, because it was given to the nations. Now, just a side note, this word leave out, that's not exactly a good translation. And most of the English translations translate it that way, that it means toss out or to throw out, which I'm not sure what the emphasis there is, but he says, throw out the court that is outside the temple, and you may not measure it. Why? Because it was given to the nations, and they, the nations, will tread down the holy city 42 months. Now this, Alfred, is why I included the city, the Jerusalem, in the statement, because I knew where this was going, right? The nations, or the Gentiles, it could be translated, are going to tread down the holy city for 42 months. Okay? How many years is 42 months? Daddy-O says, could the two witnesses be the apostles and the resulting church? Nope. Nope, couldn't be. Hold on, we'll get there. 42 months in years is 3.5 years, right? Which we saw yesterday in Daniel, and we saw yesterday in Revelation, and we will see again. So for 3.5 years, yep, good work, gentlemen. For 3.5 years, the Gentiles are going to tread down the holy city. The holy city is Jerusalem. It's going to be under siege for 3.5 years, which correlates very well to starting in 66 and ending in 70. And I will give to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 1,260 days, which is almost the same number as in Daniel and is still in the same time frame as 42 months. It's not exact. It depends on whether you're using the lunar calendar or the solar calendar, but all of this time frame is very, very similar. I think that's because they're all describing the same period. Again, 66 to 70 AD. Okay, so he's to measure the temple. Don't measure the outer court. That's for the Gentiles, and the Gentiles are going to tread down the holy city for 42 months. Okay? I believe this is the same thing that Jesus talked about in Matthew 24, Luke 21, the fulfillment of the Gentiles coming against Jerusalem. That's what he says in Luke 21. When you see the armies gathered around and the city will be trampled. In fact, let me just pull that up here. Let me pull that up here. Just so you can see this. I'm not going to go through the whole, but when you may see Jerusalem surrounded by encampments, then know that her desolation has come near. Those in Judea, let them flee to the mountains. Those in her midst, let them depart out. Those in the countries, do not let them come into her, because these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all things that have been written. Woe to those who with child, those of giving suck in those days. There will be great distress or tribulation on the land and wrath on this people, the Israelites. And they will fall by the mouth of the sword. It will be led captive to all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trodden down by the nations until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Times of the nations be fulfilled. Right? Same thing. Daniel prophesied of this. Others did. This is what John is seeing here. The nation, the Gentiles, are going to tread down the holy city, Jerusalem, for 42 months. Do you see how clear this is? Pointing to the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. All right. So I'll give my two witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days. So these two witnesses are going to be prophesying during the time of the holy city being destroyed. Yep, Stephen's on it. So these two witnesses will prophesy, and they will be clothed with sackcloth. Sackcloth, of course, was what people wore in the Old Testament when they were mourning distress and when they were worn down with famine, being defeated in battle, and under God's wrath, which most of the occasions when they were under duress, when they were experiencing famine and loss of life and loss of property and all that, and most of the time when they had to wear sackcloth, it's because they had sinned against God and God was bringing judgment on them. So these two prophets are clothed not in, or these two witnesses, I should say, when they're prophesying, they're not wearing any kind of royal robe or anything. They are in sackcloth, indicating there's going to be weeping and mourning and destruction and in the city as they prophesy. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the God of the earth. This verse 4 is an allusion to Zechariah chapter 4. We'll come back to that next week. This is part of the unclear element. But let's get to what I think is clear. Now, you may disagree with me. That's fine. Unique Book says the olive trees are actual people. Okay, but let me at least try to persuade you of what is clear here, in my view. You may not be persuaded. That's fine. So these two witnesses are going to prophesy during the fall of Jerusalem. Those two witnesses are here identified as the olive trees and the lampstands. Now, here's where our pronouns start to work against us in Greek and English, but something is clear in the Greek. So the olive trees and the lampstands here are feminine nouns. The them here in verse 5, if anyone will injure them, is masculine, so that it goes back to those who are clothed in sackcloth, which are the witnesses who are prophesying. So I agree that the two olive trees and the two lampstands are identified here as the two witnesses. But now it goes back to the idea of them witnessing and prophesying in sackcloth. And if anyone wants to injure them, the two witnesses, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. Okay, this is another allusion to the Old Testament. When you think of fire proceeding out of something, what's the first thing that comes to mind? We see lots of suggestions about witnesses here. Well, I'm not going to interact with those yet. Where do you think of fire coming out? Against prophets who are against God's prophet. Yeah, Scott, very good. Elijah on Mount Carmel. All right, so if anyone may will to injure the two witnesses, fire proceeds out of their mouth and devours their enemies. Okay, so I'm just going to throw this out to Unique Monk and some of the other, I just saw some passing comments, so forgive me if I misquote you because I haven't looked at these comments carefully. Remember, this is a book of images. I'm going to try to show you, I do think the two witnesses refer to people, but not people who are alive. That's not the point. Okay, so just hang on, see if I can show you that these are not representing human beings who are alive when John writes this or sees this. Okay, again, I may not persuade you, but just hear me out. Okay. Remind me to come back to the idea of witness at the end, okay? All right, so these two witnesses, if anyone wants to injure the witnesses, fire proceeds out of the mouth of the witnesses and devours their enemies. So there are enemies, those who are hostile to the witnesses, and they want to harm the witnesses. If they desire to do that, the witnesses are going to open their mouths and fire is going to come out of their mouths and devour those who are trying to harm them. And if anyone may will to injure those witnesses, it is required of him to be killed. Okay, so just stop for a moment. Don't try to figure out who this is. Just catch that. So there are two witnesses. And they are going to be prophesying during the destruction of the holy city, Jerusalem. Okay, so just keep that imagery in your head. Who would be prophesying during the destruction of Jerusalem? They are bearing witness. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and get back there. According to the law of Moses, in order for someone to be judged guilty, how many witnesses were required? 2 or 3, right? Okay, Unique Monk, we get it. You don't believe it's the law and the prophets. Fine, but are you at least open to being wrong? I mean, I'm open to being wrong, but just maybe stop writing for a moment and just hear me out. Okay? And for all of you, just again, I may not persuade you, but at least don't assume. I mean, if we shut off our willingness to be corrected, then we're never going to learn. Now, again, I may be wrong, and maybe you can persuade me of something different from what I see here, but just try it. Just at least hear me out. Okay, so 2 or 3 witnesses. Yeah, I can see there's still a delay. 2 or 3 witnesses are required to condemn, right? In the Old Covenant. So that's why there are 2 witnesses, I believe. And these 2 witnesses are prophesying during the destruction of the holy city. And if anyone seeks to injure those witnesses, fire's proceeding out of their mouth. Do you see how this is clearly symbolic? I mean, unless you're going to believe that there are 2 actual men here who are going to breathe fire, then we need to remember this is all representative. It's all symbolic. All right, Unique Monk, we haven't gotten the dead bodies yet. It's obvious you've already made up your mind. That's fine. But for the rest of you, ignore him for now and just at least see the flow of the argument here. If anyone may will to injure those witnesses, fire proceeds out of the mouth of the witnesses and devours their enemies. The enemies would be those who are trying to injure them. And if anyone may will to injure them, thus it is required of him to be killed. So anyone who is trying to harm the witnesses, it's required of him to be killed. It is necessary for him to be killed. The testimony of the witnesses required them to be killed. These witnesses have authority to shut the sky, that rain may not rain in the days of their prophecy. Who had the authority to stop the rain in the days of their prophecy? Anyone? Anyone? Who had the authority to make it stop raining during the days of their prophecy? Yep, Elijah. Elijah, exactly. And so these witnesses have the authority to shut the sky that it may not rain, and they, the witnesses, have authority over the waters to turn them to blood, to strike the land with every plague as often as they may will. Who did that? Of course, Moses. The 2 witnesses are the law and the prophets, or the prophets and the law. Elijah representing the prophets, Moses representing the law. This is why I've told you this before. When Jesus says at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount, I did not come to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill them. To make that statement about whether or not we are required to keep the 10 Commandments, which is what Reformed theology does, is to completely misunderstand what Jesus was saying. He was coming to fulfill, not to obey. He doesn't say I came to obey the law. He said I came to fulfill the law and the prophets. And then he goes on and pronounces judgment on the Pharisees and the rest of the disobedient Jews in the Sermon on the Mount. And indeed, that's almost what the entire book of Matthew is about. It is a terrifying thing for Jesus to say, I came to fulfill the law and the prophets. Meaning, I'm coming to bring the wrath of the old covenant that the law required and that the prophets foretold on this generation. So, John now sees that these witnesses, the Ark of the Covenant, didn't I pull that up here? Hold on. Oh, I thought I pulled it up here. Here it is. Okay. Exodus 25. Okay, going back to the law. And you shall make a holy precinct for me. This is the Septuagint again. A holy precinct, sanctuary. This is tabernacle idea, right? You shall make a tabernacle for me, and I shall appear among you. So this is the original instructions that the Jews build this tent, tabernacle, and eventually the temple. That's what the holy precinct is, okay? And you shall make for me according to all that I show you on the mountain, the pattern of the tent and the pattern of all its furnishings, so shall you make. And you shall make an ark of witness. See that? You shall make an ark of witness. The ark of the covenant, as it is usually called, is sometimes in the Old Testament called the ark of witness or testimony. And it's easy to read through that and miss that. But why is it called an ark of witness or testimony? Because of the terms of the covenant. It is bearing witness to the fact that if they obey the covenant, God will bless them. If they disobey the covenant, God will curse them and destroy them. And it is constantly bearing witness to the fact that they are under God's judgment. You'll make it from this decay-resistant wood. The length is this long and so on. It shall be gold-plated outside. Make it twisted this way. 4 rings, 2 rings, poles, all that. I want to get down to... and here, verse 15 or 16, depending on if you're reading Greek or Hebrew. You shall deposit in it the ark of the witnesses. Here, it's plural in the Greek. Whichever I give you. And you shall make a propitiatory, as a cover of pure gold, length 2.5 cubits, width and so on. You shall make 2 cherubim of gold, and they shall be made 1 cherub on this, 1 cherub of that, and yada, 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 yada. And wasn't it? Did I miss it? I will speak to you. Here it is. I will speak to you from above the propitiatory in between the 2 cherubim that are on the ark of witness, even in accord with all that I may command the sons of Israel. So the Ark of the Covenant, of the Old Covenant, is an ark of witness, which all these allusions tie together. The law itself bears witness to the wrath that God was going to bring on disobedient Israel. And Elijah, representing the prophets, bearing witness. So as Jerusalem is being destroyed by the Gentiles, the law and the prophets are prophesying, bearing witness to the fact that this is just of God to do this because it's what he told them from the very beginning. So the idea of somebody wanting to injure them, these are not living human beings. It's the idea of injuring the law and the prophets. And if so, they are going to be killed because the law and the prophets require them to be killed. Okay. And when they may finish their testimony, the beast, here we come to it, the beast that is coming up out of the abyss. We've seen the abyss already. Now there's this beast coming out, and he's going to make war with them. Them would seem to refer back to the witnesses. And the beast will overcome them and kill them. And their body, the bodies of these witnesses, is on the street of the great city that is called spiritually Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. Obviously, Jerusalem. All right. Well, I see that our time has come. I saw a bunch of comments flying through here, and I'm sure Unique Monk is trying to persuade you all of something here. So let me take a look. I was just trying to give you enough to go back through this whole section and see if you can figure out some other elements. We'll come back and look at it. All right. Yes. I will give power to my witnesses. Is talking about people surely? No, I think it's talking about the power of what God had already revealed through the law and the prophets. How is law and the prophets prophecy? Really? Okay. Unique Monk, again, it's clear that you have made up your mind and are not open to an alternative view. Fine. I don't want to hear more of that here. Because all you're doing is asking questions. You're not, who are they? And what's your proof? Yeah, the law and the prophets are going to lay dead in the streets. They've been destroyed by the people. All right, how's that the law and the prophets I just showed you? Again, clearly not persuasively so, but so be it. Moses' law, prophet on the Mount of Transfiguration. Yep, it's good. Elijah asked for rain after some years of drought. Yes, but first, remember he prayed that it wouldn't rain and ran off because the king was going to try to kill him. Yep. Megan says, oh my gosh, it's so obvious now. How was I not able to recognize that before? Yeah. It's pretty literal to me. Yeah, well, okay. Ruth says, yes, so true. So glad to hear my viewpoint explained better than I've been able to do. Great. Heaven and earth are two witnesses in Deuteronomy. True, but we're told here about these witnesses, right? They I mean, it sure seems to me like clear allusions to Moses and Elijah. The witnesses in the ark would be the tablets of the covenant, correct? Both tablets were in there, and it's not one that's the table for God and the other table for men, like Reformed theology teaches. There's nothing that says that anywhere. Yeah, we'll come back to that, Scott, next week. God speaks through his words, the law and the prophets, the contract they agreed to. Indeed. Amy says, Luke 16:27, this parable is about exactly this, not what heaven and hell are like. Is that... the five brothers... Yeah, did you not hear Moses and the prophets? Yeah, okay. Witnesses not two people, but the church. New Testament believers. So New Testament believers can pray and stop the rain and turn the water to blood, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, again, I may not persuade you, and that's fine. But you're at least going to have to wrestle with the question of whatever your view of the witnesses are. How do they call? How do they make it stop raining and turn water to blood? That kind of thing. Okay. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. Tomorrow's Friday. We'll have Freeform Friday, and we will pick this up again on Monday for the partners. Join us on Saturday, 10:30 Mountain Time, and we will be able to talk about this a little bit further and hear more of your questions. Appreciate that. All right. Have a great one, everyone. Grace and peace to you.